and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host.
And I'm Matt. God!
Come on, we had to do it. We didn't have any other choice on this one.
Right. There's not that many options.
This week on the show, it is another one of our Council of Doof episodes. What does that mean, Matt?
That means that, well, once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Council of Doof level will get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the Doof canon. Scott and I and maybe some guests will meet, talk about the movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we leave the final decision up to you fine people. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find a link in the show notes of this very episode to go cast your vote for whether or not this movie should be entered into the canon. Matt, what has the council brought to us this month?
This week, the council has put forth the 1982 film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
It's supposed to say film. You really just Ron Burgundy your way through anything. It's obviously supposed to be film.
I just wanted to see if you would respond, because everybody who's listening is just going to think I said film.
That is right, Matt. We're talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I can't wait to... I don't think we've ever talked about a Star Trek film on this show, or Star Trek anything on this show.
Yeah, I mean, we occasionally mention that
we like it.
Next Generation is special to us, but we rarely talk about the films overall, because I mean they're mostly not. Anyway, this will be a fun conversation.
It will, and then after we talk about Star Trek II, we're going to spend some brief time talking about the box office of the last week, because a big movie came out and the results were a little disappointing. And then we're going to finish off the episode by chatting about the very first episode of the newest Disney Plus series, Loki.
All right.
So that's our episode for this week.
Cool.
All right, let's waste no further time. Actually, I'm going to waste some time. Take that back. I'm going to waste a little bit of time. Because before we get started, Matt, I just wanted to say special thank you to all our listeners out there who really enjoyed our segment on our top 5 films and who participated as well. We got emails, we got people talking on our Reddit and our Discord about, what their favorite, the 5 films that will teach you about them were. And I thought that was a really fun activity that I enjoyed doing with you. And it was great to see the audience respond in the way that it did. So thank you everyone who submitted your films. It was great to see them. Yeah.
Not only did people say the films, but also some very thoughtful explanations for why. Yeah. And those of you who picked the same TV shows I did, we're best friends now. So
yeah, we both just said films like 5 times and we meant TV shows.
We did. We meant TV shows, obviously. We did that last week too. So.
Yes, it's very, very hard, this job.
Yeah.
All right, now let's waste no further time and get into our conversation on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you, and I wish to go on hurting you. I shall leave you as you left me, marooned for all eternity, buried alive, buried alive. Sean! Sean!
At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
With the assistance of the Enterprise crew, Admiral Kirk must stop an old nemesis, Khan Noonien Singh, from using the life-generating Genesis device as the ultimate weapon.
Oh, this movie was written by Jack P. Swords and directed by Nicholas Meyer, and perhaps most importantly, had no involvement of Gene Roddenberry whatsoever, because they kicked him out. After the first Star Trek movie didn't make any money, they were like, Gene, we got it from here.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the man has quite a personality on him. So.
He does. He does. All right, Matt. Let's talk about this movie. I think we have to, because this is the sequel to both a specific episode of a TV show and an entire 3 series of a TV show, and technically another movie. I think we got to do a little bit of setup here. So before we start talking about this movie in detail, what is your history with this movie and I guess the original series in general?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I guess these are some of those movies where I don't remember watching them for the first time. I think at some point my mom probably decided that it was time for me to see all of the Star Trek movies, and so that happened. Not necessarily in order. I didn't necessarily watch any of the TV show. I'll say that.
Okay.
So I in fact, I think I watched a ton of TNG, and then watched these movies and was confused because I was like, where's Captain Picard? But I mean, definitely there's like a couple of these movies that I've always loved, and then there's a bunch where I watched like once and then was like, okay, all right, whatever.
Have you seen the episode of the show that is the I guess the prequel to this one?
No.
I forget the name of the episode.
Is it like Space Seed or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. So you've not seen the con setup episode. You don't really have to. So
I have not. I mean, I have heard that one interesting thing about it is that the con in the show is way more of like a subtle, kind of low key manipulator, in contrast to this con, who is completely theatrical and larger than life.
I almost think that's part of the point, though. I mean, we can get into that as we talk about the movie itself, but yes, he definitely is. I mean, it's just also because like the tone of the show in 1967 and this giant big budget movie in 1982 are much different. So it kind of makes sense that they did a little bit something different with that. But this movie comes to me at an interesting time, Matt, because I don't know if you remember, it was probably about a year ago now that I was talking to you about the fact that I'm kind of doing this great big Star Trek rewatch project where I'm going through every single episode of Star Trek from the very first one through every single different show. I just recently finished my original series rewatch. I got through all 3 seasons, and I had watched the first movie a couple weeks ago, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And then this showed up on our nominations page, and I promise it wasn't me that nominated it. It just kind of fell right into the place where I was going to be watching this movie anyway, and I was like, oh, that's perfect timing. But it allowed me to approach this movie from a place that I was never able to before, because I just didn't have the context of the whole series, in my mind as watching it. And I think it allowed me to appreciate it more than I ever had. I've always enjoyed this movie, but I think I loved it more than I ever had, just knowing the context of, like, I mean, the spoilers, by the way, the Spock Kirk moment at the end of the movie is beautiful and heartbreaking, and I get upset and almost cry every single time I watch it. But having the 3 seasons of that friendship really forming in my head just made it hit me harder.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think just having seen the movies was already kind of enough for you to really understand that these guys are best friends and have been their whole career, basically. And I think this movie actually does a great job by itself, just showing by implication that Kirk and Bones and Spock have all known each other so long that they have that kind of like that kind of friendship where you can give each other a hard time, which I once read good advice about how to quickly portray that characters are friends isn't to show them being nice to each other, is to show them being assholes to each other. Yeah. Casually. Because that really shows that, okay, they must really know each other well if they can talk to each other that way and kind of make fun of each other, and which they totally do. Like I really think on the script level, the movie does a good job conveying the relationships and the, because there's actually a lot of groundwork to do, right? Like you can watch this movie without having any of that groundwork.
You absolutely can, yeah.
And it still works. So I think they did a really good job on that.
Yeah, and I the thing that most fascinated me about this movie is how this is a movie about an old Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, I guess it is, and they don't shy away from the fact that he's old. Like, in fact, the movie like continuously reinforces the fact that he's an old man now. Like, there's this recurring beat throughout the movie of the glasses. It's almost a 3 beat where the final beat is that the glasses have been shattered and he has to read his birthday present book from Spock at a huge distance because his reading glasses are shattered. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just really interesting to me. I think we were talking earlier, William Shatner's 52 years old in this movie, which in 2021, at 52 years old, you're playing in a Marvel movie and are super fucking buff. But in 1982, you're an old man and you act like an old man and you move like an old man and you can't see anymore. I don't know. It's just, I think a lot of this movie is Kirk is an old man that is kind of hiding from the world a little bit. And his arc in the movie is almost an arc of rejuvenation. I think that's why the Genesis device being this life generating device is through the process of this movie, Kirk like reminds himself what it means to be alive. And that's why his almost final line in the movie is when someone asks him how he's doing, he said, "I feel young." I feel like the events of the story rejuvenate him.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, they really had to lean into this dude's old of this whole thing.
Yeah. And then he quotes Peter Pan of all things, which is about a character who does not grow old. That's definitely all throughout it. And then, I mean, it's interesting. So this is a big point of ambivalence for me is they take for my money, like the saddest film death of all time. And then they reverse it. Almost immediately. I
actually forgot that the movie ends on the coffin on the planet. I thought this was just a Star Trek 3 thing that they reversed the death.
Yeah.
But they didn't even wait to do that.
At least you could argue that it's left ambiguous here or as a tease. But we know where it goes and we know what they intended by that. And so it's like, okay. And that, and I mean, I guess it's not all that ambiguous because they inserted the bit where he touches McCoy and says, "Remember," and you're like, okay, we get it. But honestly, so like, look, like it doesn't. Here's why it's ambivalent for me though. Like it doesn't ruin the death scene. Like I've watched this death scene like 10 times. I tear up every time. It's perfectly done in every way.
Yeah,
I just kind of wish they hadn't undone it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. It doesn't ruin the movie, but I hate it. I do hate it. Like, I don't know, just have the guts to kill off Spock. Like, that's part of the reason the death scene works is because it's kind of upending everything you understood about the show and about Star Trek. Like, which is layered in with the whole Kobayashi Maru thing, which was I loved it so much, right? Like the recurring beat of the Kobayashi Maru is the unwinnable scenario, the death scenario that Kirk refuses to face because he hates it. He won't do it. And then suddenly at the end of the movie, he's finally presented with the no-win scenario, with the he's dying no matter what you can do scenario, and he can't deal with it. And to undo that in any way ruins that entire lesson. And I hate it. I hate like the whole thing with the show is that Kirk, Spock, and Bones, no matter what happened, they were always going to find a way to get out of it. Like that, half of the fun of watching the original series is like, okay, how are they going to get out of this one? And so the fact that the movie is willing to say, hey, what if they can't? And then saying, oh, just kidding. They actually,
of course they can. Of course, this is a show. This is a show for children. What did you think we were going to kill Spock? I mean, and like yet another source of ambivalence is like, I don't think The Search for Spock is a great film, but The Voyage Home is a fun movie. The Final Frontier is not a great movie. Undiscovered Country is a fun movie. And so like, okay, well, if you only get those movies if Spock is still alive, then I guess I'm glad they did it. It's just like, I guess I'm just so conflicted about the idea of like yanking the rug out from under your dramatic stakes in a way like that and getting off scot-free. I don't know. I didn't even really come into this intending to talk about this.
I did, so that works.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's interesting that we're going to start with this. I think this is a good thing to start with because then we can get that out of our system and we can talk about why the movie is incredible.
Yeah.
But I think I would be in a different position if it was just I could easily carve off the third movie and just look at this movie in isolation and say, no, they were really going to kill him. He was really going to stay dead. And that was always the plan. And I could say, well, okay, well, I respect you, movie. But you're right. Like they throw in the little thing. Like I almost even wish the wink that they did towards the possibility that Spock survives was just them looking at the planet and talking about the concept of new life, Like I think that would be enough. Like you don't have to throw all your cards on the table, but you can just wink towards it. And that wasn't enough for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I just wish they hadn't done that final shot of the torpedo coffin.
Yeah.
because it's I mean, if anything, it's like actively confusing because you're like, wait, so did they shoot his coffin at the planet, or did it just coincidentally fall down to the planet? And then
I mean, it does look like it goes flying by the planet. Maybe it's just orbiting around. I don't know. I'm quibbling now, but
it just lands like totally safe and pristine.
yeah, well, they build their torpedo coffins to be completely resistant to gravitational forces and atmospheric.
The planet. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but like that's the thing is like it. Okay. I think we've made ourselves clear.
Yeah.
It's all of this. All of this is really in reaction to the fact that it is such a perfectly done scene where everything about the scene is set up in advance. Like everything he says to Kirk mirrors something he said earlier, and thus you understand the context of what this means between these two men, and why Spock would make this choice at this point, and who Spock is and who Kirk is and what they mean to each other, and all the details of Scotty and Bones being there too, and they're each having their own totally human reactions to what's happened. It's like just the build up, like just everything about it is just the timing, the fact that it shows Kirk leave the bridge and then like run. There's like several shots of him like making his way there.
Yeah, I mean, I love the moment where he calls down to the engine room and expects to get Scotty on there, and it's Bones, and he's just like saying, Kirk, you better get down here. And he looks over. The first thing he does is look over to Spock's chair, and we see this beautiful shot of the empty chair. And the movie just hangs on that for a couple seconds. Yeah. And then it's like Kirk knows from that point on. Like he knows. Yeah. And so he takes off running. He runs down there. It's like the fastest we've seen him move in the entire movie because, again, he's an old man. And it's a perfect scene. It is a perfect scene. And I think you're right. Like, it's one thing to just throw a sad death scene into the end of a movie, and it'll make people sad, and you'll leave on a very impactful moment, which allows people to leave the theaters going, wow, which a lot of shows and movies and stories do, right? It's another to make that feel like the most obvious earned moment because it's set up over and over again throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. And that's like, when you're really sitting down and studying the structure of the movie, I think that's what comes clear, is that this was set up from that very first moment. Like, we open on the Kobayashi Maru. We open on this moment of dealing with the death of people, dealing with the inability to save people. And the first thing we do after Admiral Kirk shows up is he has a conversation with Spock about this very thing, this exact thing. And Spock gives him the book. Oh, what was the book again? I blanked on it.
Oh, shoot. I did too. Weird. I have to say I was watching this in the room with my kids, so
sure.
I've watched it a million times, so it's not like I was, but no, I don't remember. Probably something super relevant though.
Something incredibly poetic and thematically relevant, and let's just say it was great without remembering exactly what it was.
I'm sure it was.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, that's like, it's all leading to this thing. And so it makes this as a movie specifically about that thing. It's about a man who has never really had to deal with that thing. But the great thing about this movie is that's not all it's about too, because it's also about Kirk dealing with a son that he's never met and a woman that he abandoned. And that contrasted with Khan and his inability to get over his white whale of Kirk.
Right. Which is all of Kirk's themes are about new life, right?
Yeah.
He has a son that I guess he knew about, but just had nothing to do with.
Yeah, he did know about, but he was specifically told to stay away.
Yeah, which is very interesting in and of itself. But yeah, new life and rejuvenation and youth, and then Khan being a sort of literal manifestation of being stuck in the past. I mean, Khan is literally from the past.
Yes, he's from 1996, which is hilarious to think about.
He's genetically engineered Superman from the past, who is mentally stuck in the past as well. He's stuck. He still thinks that he needs to be the ruler of the world, and he's still hung up on the wrong that Kirk did him, and he destroys all of his loved ones and himself in order to get revenge, which is a completely backwards looking motivation. So from the script, from the storytelling perspective,
that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved I loved it. Like we were talking about Khan and how different his performance is. I loved it though. Like this is the thing. I was talking to you about this earlier that I think, first of all, I think when people think of Star Trek, the original series, I think they're thinking of the movies more than they're thinking of the shows. I think like the imprint on pop culture, the movies have been a bigger one than the shows have, I think, unless you get to the real nerdy Trekkie people. And I think part of the making fun of William Shatner we do for his overacting, quote unquote, portrayal of Kirk comes from the movies more than it does the show, which is not to say he doesn't have moments in the show. Like at one point he reads the preamble to the Constitution in one of the episodes of the show, and it's like the most hilariously overacted and wonderful thing ever. But I think more than anything, it's the movies, and specifically this movie is Kirk going ham for 2 hours. But I think that on the flip side of that, Khan is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I think Ricardo Montalban is doing, it's not the same kind of overacting, but it's the same kind of big acting. And so when the two of them are in a scene together playing off of each other, like the famous scene where Kirk screams Khan, people always make fun of Kirk screaming Khan. They don't make fun of Ricardo Montalban like leaning back in his chair and like savoring and almost shaking with pleasure as he fucks. So it's so over the top and wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like this was one of the things that they were taking advantage of by breaking free of Roddenberry was to be like, we want to make this more theatrical and more, like dramatic and more fun, and less because I mean, I love Roddenberry. Everybody loves Roddenberry, but like he was going for a very specific thing that was sort of like a sci-fi anthology thing where it's really rather dramatically inert generally.
It works in TV. It does. Yeah. It does not work in movies. I mean, you can look at Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It is basically just a longer episode of the TV show, and it just doesn't work as a movie.
Yeah, and wasn't season 1 of TNG like his brainchild basically? It was the worst thing. and then when they broke away from him, look, like I don't want to be hard. Like that's the thing. We all have to thank Roddenberry for what he did.
Yeah,
but the product that he had in mind was not really the thing the entirety of the thing that we love. It was a big chunk of the thing that we love.
There's a thing called a good idea, and there's a thing called execution on that idea.
Yes. And
he has the first, definitely, and he does not necessarily always have the second.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, definitely they were, it's funny because everybody quotes the same like moments from Shatner where it's like, what does God need with a spaceship or a starship? Right. Where it's like, it's the unusual cadence that he uses and sort of like overly poised way that he does things sometimes. But I don't know, like I've never been bothered by Shatner's acting. I think it's fine. It's just,
I enjoy it. And I mean, especially like a lot of the things they quote the most in this one is when he's like trying to fuck with Khan specifically.
Yeah. Like
he's overacting almost intentionally, like to try to bait Khan into stuff. So I don't know. Like is it silly? Yes, it's absolutely silly. But like a lot of this movie is silly. Like think about this movie. It's about a guy from 1996 who's obsessed with killing an old ass admiral, and he's using a Genesis device that's going to create new life to do it. It's a little silly, and it's okay. I think the movie's comfortable being a little silly.
Yeah.
Like it also has brain bugs and like it has a lot of crazy shit in it.
Yeah. The brain bugs are super campy and pretty delightfully ridiculous. And I mean, especially when you look at it now, with the eye condition to modern special effects, it's just like it's just funny now.
Well, apparently, like the shot where you see the bug go into Chekhov's ear, they like just built a giant ear so they could film that and make it look like a super close up, but it's just a super big ear with a puppet.
That's so funny.
It's really great. Yeah, I mean, God, there's so much here. I don't know where. I feel like we've just started the conversation, and we've been talking for half an hour.
Wow, have we? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I love the element of like the difference between Khan's crew and the Enterprise crew. I guess that's one great element where Khan listens to nobody. There's basically only one character who even bothers trying to talk to him, and he just ignores him and shoots him down and gets him killed. And then of course Kirk. Like I think this is more subtext. This is more something that I kind of was thinking about while watching it. But it's like Khan is portrayed as being this super genius, like tactician. He's sort of like this untouchable Superman. But the reason Kirk is able to beat him is because Kirk isn't just Kirk. Kirk has the Enterprise crew.
Yeah.
Who are all resourceful in their own ways.
Yeah, and it's not just like the thing that I love is that in a different kind of movie, you have the character of Saavik, which is the Kirstie Alley character we haven't talked about much yet, who's kind of, I mean, she's a Vulcan, and so she represents like very clearly in the movie, she represents like the by the book way of doing things, and so she kind of sort of comes into conflict with Kirk because he doesn't always follow the line of regulation. But that's not like 100% true, right? Because like the thing about Kirk is that he'll follow the regulations when he has to. He'll just get creative when he doesn't, or when he sees the need for it. And so like there's a version of this movie that just has Saavik like constantly screaming and yelling at Kirk. And actually there's a character in the first Star Trek movie that is basically that. Like Kirk takes the Enterprise back from, I forget what his name is, but he plays the dad on Seventh Heaven. And he takes the Enterprise away from him and installs him as like a special counsel. And like half the movie is them arguing about what the correct course of action is. And the fact that Kirk is like too aggressive and too cocksure. And it's just this constant back and forth. And Saavik fills that role sort of, but not entirely, because she is a valuable member of the crew still. And she provides assistance and insight when necessary.
Yeah, and she has her own arc as well. So she can't just serve that role, because her arc is actually to go from, the beginning of the movie, she's the one who fails the Kobayashi Maru, or I don't know if you fail or succeed, but
succeed by failing.
Yeah, she completes the Kobayashi Maru, and is really pissed off because she doesn't accept the idea of a no-win scenario, much like Kirk. And so she has her arc as well, parallel to Kirk's essentially.
The recognition that you need to accept that scenario sometimes, as much as we don't want to.
Yeah, sorry. Before I forget, this is Saavik related, because we were talking about how perfect the death scene is, and I think that an underappreciated, maybe underappreciated by me previously, part of why it hits so hard is not just the death scene, but the subsequent funeral scene.
Yeah,
where Kirk is, on the verge of losing it while he's giving the speech, and she's crying as well, and like that's another scene that's just like you can no longer make fun of William Shatner's performances, because he does that so well. The amount of control or just like talent that goes into doing what he does with his voice and his face in that scene is impeccable.
And the voice crack on Human is perfect. It's perfect. I love it. And I love it too, because you think like if Spock were there listening to this speech, he'd probably be annoyed by it. But I mean, as annoyed as Spock can be by something.
You'd raise an eyebrow.
Yeah. And I mean, like we can roll our eyes at Saavik, the Vulcan, crying, which is not Vulcan at all. But apparently like there's this whole subplot that kind of got carved out of the movie where Saavik is not full-blooded Vulcan. She's like half Vulcan, half Romulan. And so there are like several distinct moments in the movie where she shows emotion beyond what she should. Like I think there's one point where she gets mad and like says damn it or something, and then I think when Scotty shows up on the bridge, she like does this like kind of move, and then of course the crying at the end. But like obviously that's not textual to the movie. That's something I read outside the movie. So like within the concept of the movie, Saavik crying at the end almost goes to say, this is so fucking sad that even a Vulcan can't keep it together.
Yeah. And
I think whether or not that's true to the quote, like to the technical blah, blah, blah Vulcan, I don't care. It's powerful and heartbreaking. And I love it today.
Yeah. I think the moderate fan of Star Trek would not really care anyway. And in fact, I mean, this gets real nitpicky actually. But like the thing about the Vulcans and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you've watched the original series, so maybe there's more detail on that. But like, it's not like Vulcans genetically don't have emotions. It's that their whole culture is based around like a meditative 1,000-year-old tradition of training yourself to, very rigorously control yourself and your emotions and to think logically. So like, it's not inconceivable that a Vulcan would have an emotional reaction. It's just like they're very, very good at keeping a lid on it.
Yeah, I mean, the basic problem is that Spock is half human, and so any moment of emotional struggle that we see in Spock throughout the course of the show is just kind of yada yada as him being half human. I mean,
Right.
we very rarely see a full-blooded Vulcan in the show like put up against a stressor that would test their ability to maintain emotions. But I think you are right. It's not like they are genetically incapable of experience emotion. That's not quite how it works. They are just very, very good at it, and that their whole culture is based around it. So the idea that like it would be seen as a huge embarrassment if other Vulcans were to see Saavik do that. It's actually really interesting because it comes from, I don't know how much of Vulcan past. This is going to be such a nerdy episode of the show. Jesus.
It's Star Trek, man.
Yeah. Like there was basically a forever war on Vulcan where they're just like, they were out of control and barbaric and terrible. And it was basically like the only way they survived as a species was like, we got to get control of our shit. And they did.
They did. And the Romulans are basically Vulcans who didn't and then went off and became Rome.
Yeah. Romans. Romulans.
Romans. Yeah, you're right. And then they literally like evolved to have Ponfar. So that I mean,
just get horny every just very rarely.
It's funny though, like the you see why they don't do this much in the show, because it's actually kind of boring to have characters who literally don't have emotional reactions. Like, the closest thing I can actually think of is Tuvok in Voyager, who is indeed a very boring character. Like the only times when they do anything interesting with him is like when some weird alien thing happens to him or transporter accident and he's not quite himself anymore.
Yeah.
So like that's I think there's good reason to sort of play with the idea of a Vulcan, but then the real point of a Vulcan as a concept is to say, what if human, but etc., which is what Roddenberry and what science fiction is always doing with aliens.
Well, and they just mine it for so much wonderful humor. I mean, like, everyone talks about the relationship between Spock and Kirk, but the relationship between McCoy and Spock is also the most hilarious, because like McCoy is like constantly pissed off at Spock for being cold and uncaring, and he's just like, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Like, this is who I am. Leave me alone.
It does work really well, because McCoy gets to be a kind of ridiculous caricature of like short-term, short-sighted, but understandable impulses.
Yeah.
In a way that would kind of drive you crazy if he was just there and Spock wasn't there to offset him. But then he kind of gets to stand in for like that part of us as well. Like because McCoy is definitely not like a normal person either. He's a huge caricature.
But he is absolutely a depiction of what a average human being would do when up against a Vulcan-like character. Because we would just be like, how can you not care about this thing? Like, there were episodes of the show where Spock is like, okay, well, the most logical thing to do is for me to kill myself now, so bye. And McCoy's like, wait, what? No.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, so this kind of situation that takes place in this movie, the show has circled around before. Obviously, they always get out of it because that's how the show works. But I mean, the trio of those three is so good, and it's what elevated the show, and it's like the fact that they play off each other so well in this movie as well. I mean, like, I love Scotty, I love Chekhov, I love Sulu, but they were always kind of well removed from the central trilogy of the three of them. And it's because that trio works so well against each other. I mean, they even kind of poke fun at it in the movie, right? Where like Shatner's like, I'm going down there. Are you coming with me, McCoy? And then Saavik is like, no, there's federal regulation that says you must come with heavily armed escort. And Kirk's like, there's no such regulation, because he literally never did that. The captain of the ship and the senior officer is going down to the planet by themselves.
Which of course is ridiculous, and they're making fun of that.
Yes,
and then they just get to get away with it.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing that you just reminded me of, though, like based on that idea, is the idea of red shirts, and then the idea that this is like the first and possibly only time in Star Trek where they treat the deaths of side characters seriously.
Yeah, like they matter. Like that moment where the turbo lift opens and Scotty is carrying the corpse of one of his ensigns is like a huge moment in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like for a while there, Kirk has blood on his uniform,
right,
for quite a while. And
yeah,
it is this movie. I think this is like, if you probably like got everyone together who worked on this movie, this was definitely a conscious choice of theirs, that they were going to really dive into what it's like to be just a crew member on the ship. Like Star Trek has always kind of just been about the bridge crew, and we see more of the ship. We see more of the people in the ship running around, working to get stuff done, like loading torpedoes, which is a great kind of setup to the death of Spock, because we literally see them load a torpedo into the same thing that we're going to see Spock launched out of later. But yeah, I mean, we really care about the interiority of the crew in a much different way. And it changes the tone of this thing. Also, I think this is probably like, I think I read somewhere that we only had PG at the time when this movie came out, because I don't think Temple of Doom had come out and ruined PG forever. But I think this is one of the only Star Trek movies that has a higher rating in, I forget which country it was, but a higher rating than the other ones, because shit gets dark, man.
Yeah, I mean, the scene where Kirk is, I guess Kirk and Scotty are comforting the dying red shirt, is really fascinating. Like just all sorts of interesting choices being made there, because number one, just having that scene in the first place, it really emphasizes like, okay, like Kirk, you're barely staying ahead of Khan, and you're losing people. Like you are losing right now. Like you've lost people. People have died because you didn't do this as well as you could have, as well as maybe you feel like you should have. And that's what Kirk is feeling, right? And then also the way that Kirk comforts the kid is like he has this expression on his face of like immense pride and love toward the kid, and then when the kid dies, it's like that turns off, and it shows that he's just like kind of devastated, right? Because like he was trying to sort of be Captain Kirk for the kid, so that the kid's last moment could be like a moment of pride and feeling like he sacrificed himself for something noble. I just thought that was such an interesting way of playing that, and showing the way Kirk sees himself and sees his role as the captain.
Yeah, and I think it is another contrast to Khan, who loses all his people too, and he does have a moment with, is that one supposed to be his son? Like I think he might be. I can't tell.
I assumed it was supposed to be his son, although I don't have any. I don't know if the movie says that.
It just seems to line up with Kirk's son so perfectly.
That
they would be his son. But like, I can't remember what he says to that guy as he's dying, but like, it's perfect, because that was the person that constantly was like, Khan, you have everything. Like, you have everything you want. You have the Genesis device. And Khan, like, for a brilliant person that's supposed to be like the smartest of the smartest of the smartest, quoting Moby Dick as you chase after the Enterprise. Did you read Moby Dick, Khan? You're putting yourself in the Captain Ahab position. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he was always supposed to be insane, and genius, right? So
sure,
he has a pathological lack of self-awareness, and he's just driven toward greed, and which is that's also interesting, right? And the movie doesn't really talk about this, but it's such a fascinating idea. Well, this small piece of the Star Trek lore, because the idea is that the people of the 22nd, 23rd century, whatever, have elevated themselves to like a higher level of moral standards, and just we're like, humanity is just better in the future because we've held ourselves to such a standard, but we've strictly outlawed genetic engineering. The improvement that we're talking about is strictly a moral improvement.
Yeah.
It's through our own efforts. It's through our own discipline. And Khan is the villain because he is cheating. He is a genetically engineered Superman where he is morally empty and morally corrupt, but elevated in every other way. And it just shows you that, like, if you neglect the moral development and then you create a Superman who is morally defective, then you end up with a monster.
Yeah.
And the movie's not really about this, but it's an element of the Star Trek lore that I think is maybe emphasized here more than anywhere else.
I love that. I mean, I love that you use the word cheating, because I think that is such a important word in context of this movie, because it occurs several times, right? It occurs when Kirk is accused of cheating on the Kobayashi Maru. He later says, I never learned to deal with death. I just cheated death. And so, yeah, I mean, you could look at Khan as a person who's cheating development, who's taking the shortcut towards advancement.
Yeah.
And that is obviously the way of ruin. And I mean, what do you think then of, in this frame, the Genesis device itself, right? Which is basically a terraforming device, kind of. But I mean, it's more than a terraforming device, because it doesn't just create the conditions for life, it creates life itself.
I mean, that's a very interesting question. I love that. I love that question. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think it can be viewed along the same lines, because it is it is playing God in a way that is sort of reaching beyond, what the movie implies people should be doing, right? It's unstable, it's dangerous. In the subsequent movie, it's revealed to actually be, broken, essentially. Like it doesn't really work. Like,
yeah, I mean, we have a little bit of hindsight to know that in Star Trek 3, like, the Genesis device is a failure, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it technically brings Spock back to life, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thematic connection there is a little wobbly.
Sure, it's a different movie. They weren't thinking of themes that way, but yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Do you have a riff on that?
I mean, no, that's why I asked you, because I didn't know the answer. I mean, it is interesting to see it as that kind of thing, because, I mean, outside of, like, this is a story about new life, you kind of wonder why they thought this device by itself would be the thing to really, the MacGuffin of the movie. And so, I mean, it is this, again, I think this is mostly subtext in the movie, but it is this incredibly dangerous weapon as well. Like, that's what Khan sees of it, that, like, it has the chance of being an incredibly destructive weapon. That's what the Klingons use it, or want to use it for, in Star Trek 3. So it is interesting that, like, there doesn't seem to be any kind of textual moral ambiguity about the use of this thing. Maybe there's just too much going on in the movie that they just couldn't fit in that kind of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing is when McCoy and Spock sort of, I guess you could say, argue about whether it's a terrible nightmare or a wonderful opportunity.
Sure.
But no, I mean, I guess I like the idea of paralleling the hubris of the Genesis device with the hubris of human genetic engineering.
Sure.
Where it's like, yes, we live in this world where we have all of this incredible technology, but there are certain things that you just shouldn't tamper with. And one of those, I guess the movie could be saying, is life itself, because you can sort of become deranged from your moral foundations if you think that you can just make a perfect man or make a new world in your own image.
Yeah, I don't know if the movie successfully nails that, because I don't think we're to see Carol Marcus or her son as people that are immoral in any way, Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a fun reading, but I agree that it's not quite there. I mean, I think it is more there in the second movie, where I was reading about this today. I definitely didn't remember this off the top of my head, but it's basically in the subsequent movie, it's very strongly stated that the reason the Genesis device is unstable is because the son, like, took a shortcut, basically. He was overeager to get the device to work, and so he used this sort of unstable. I think they called it protomatter or something, which I feel like is a word that they then later use in the reboot. I don't remember. Whatever.
The thing about this, these Star Trek stuff is they just use words and stuff over and over again.
Sure.
Isn't the space station in this movie later used in The Next Generation? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I believe so. But anyway, the subsequent movie implies that it is indeed his hubris. Although, yes, you're right. That's not in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, and it feels to me, it feels to me that the lesson that the movie wants to take you away with is that that it's actually a good thing, that the hope of new life, the hope of new creation is seen as objectively good per the morals of the movie. We have it like the wonderful scene when they're in that cavern and see like the life that the Genesis Project has created. The implication that Spock will be raised by this is seen as abject good, which is almost at odds with. It's almost at odds with the theme of the movie. That's why we're back to the beginning again, but that's why that reversal is so frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, also, like, I guess at this point I'm just editorializing more than trying to read the film, but like, I don't think genetic engineering is inherently bad, and I certainly don't think a magical device that can terraform a planet in an instant is inherently bad. I think both of these things are potentially dangerous and should be approached with caution, which the Genesis device is a wonderful tool, but it can also be a weapon.
Yeah.
And just like genetic engineering is a potentially amazing thing, we could cure all genetic diseases and increase our lifespans and just do all sorts of amazing things. But also there's like obvious potential downsides as well. But that just means that what you need that kind of moral maturity that is the hallmark of Trek. But sure. I don't think the movie says any of this.
No, it just doesn't. Yeah,
this is just us.
But it's fun. I mean, it's fun that it introduces. I mean, that's my favorite thing about Star Trek is like the stuff that it just kind of introduces to make you think about these things. And sometimes it's more direct with its paths to conversation, and sometimes it's a little more broad. But I think it's there. It's just the movie doesn't really have time to dive into it. Can we haven't talked about David Marcus very much, Kirk's son. Kirk has a son, and here he is, and he's an adult. He's a doctor, and he knows about his father too. They both know about each other, but they just haven't been in each other's lives. I love the line, like 15 years ago, I abandoned a man, and he wants to kill me, and my own son would sign up to help him, or something like that. It's such a wonderful, powerful quote from Kirk.
Yeah, it's great. It really situates where he is mentally. Yeah.
And of course, it's not at all ruined by the fact that Chekhov is in the corner, supposed to be passed out unconscious, but definitely has his eyes open and is looking around.
Yeah, just bored. Yeah, that's great. Gosh, yeah. I like the whole beginning of the movie, which is very different from the rest, which is just like the creepy part where Chekhov and the captain are going down to the planet and
sure
get captured and the earworms. We kind of already talked about the earworms, but I think I do think it's a very effective, frightening sequence.
Yeah, I do have to actually the movie though.
Okay.
Because when Khan shows up in front of Chekhov and takes off his helmet, and Chekhov goes, "Khan?" and then Khan recognizes Chekhov. That's impossible. Because in the original series they hadn't cast Chekhov. He wasn't a character in the show when that episode happened. They hadn't cast him yet.
Wow. Somebody really screwed up.
I actually read that there was a novel that fixed this.
Of course.
They actually made a whole book in which like Chekhov was like an ensign on the ship, like a technician somewhere. And he saw Khan. And then for some reason, Khan remembers this no-name, unimportant person on the ship.
He never forgets a face.
That's true, because he's a genius.
He's a brain genius. He never forgets a face, but he does forget
how three dimensions work. What he forgets.
Yeah.
I thought that battle at the end of the movie was really well done. Like, Star Trek is not well known for its like ship action.
Yeah.
Because like it's just not very good most of the times. But like the Nebula kind of chase, I thought it was really well done. I thought the tension was really well handled, and it felt believable the way that Spock kind of fed Kirk the solution to his problem. Like he just thinks too dimensionally. And
you know what you know what they did? I just realized this. They turned it into a submarine movie.
Yes.
Because submarine movies are great, and there's a huge amount of tension just for free. Is that neither of the crews really knows where the other one is, and there's this careful cat and mouse game of trying to get the other side to give something away and set up these elaborate mind game traps. And that's what this was, because you're exactly right. The normal Star Trek ship battles are the most boring things where they're just slugging it out, shooting phasers and photon torpedoes, and then one side said, "Oh, our shields are down for some reason."
No.
Yeah.
Or they say they've adapted.
Yeah.
That's the Borg.
Yeah. But yeah, this was, and it gives you like it. I think it very easily, parsimoniously conveys this idea that like the ships are not strong, like you know it's not going to take that many hits to take them down.
Yeah,
like I just mentioned this because like every fight the Enterprise D is in, it's like how many hits can the ship take?
A million.
It seems it's never damaged. It's never damaged until the movie where it's destroyed.
Yeah,
which doesn't even feel right when it happens, because you're like, it doesn't look that damaged.
Also, the Enterprise D is like way bigger than this one, right?
Yeah,
way bigger.
It is way bigger. Yeah,
I don't remember how much bigger, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not only is it much longer, but it's also like many times as wide. So.
There's like way more crew on it too. It's like it's like hundreds versus thousands of crew.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But I mean, I don't know. Like I had a lot of fun with it, and I agree that like without just devolving into an action movie, which is a lot of what modern Trek stuff does, this finds a way to make the final action set piece feel tense and action heavy without it actually being so. Because I mean, for the most part, it's just like them anxiously looking out for the other one, and then there's like one beat of action and then calm again, and then one beat of action and calm again, and then finally the coup de grace from the Enterprise.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And then, all the dramatic stuff is happening on the ship involving the, trying to get the engine to work. And yeah, just it's there's something for everybody to do all the time. Except for, I think Sulu and Uhura get the short shrift in this movie. They don't do anything. Yeah, they really do get the short shrift.
They both each read like 2 lines, and that's about it.
They're very much just like the characters from the show, and I can't be too upset about it, just because I think that in a movie with this many characters, you like have to focus the story.
Sure. I get it. It's just kind of funny because I read that like George Takei did not want to be in this movie, and like Shatner had to call him personally and ask him to be in the movie. And so you just imagine him going, "Okay, fine," and then he just doesn't do anything.
Interesting. I wonder why he didn't want to be in it.
I don't know.
It's a paycheck, right?
I heard that he and this is ironic because I heard that he and Shatner never got along on set. I mean, Shatner didn't get along with a lot of people on set. He's kind of an asshole. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad he did.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Good old Shatner.
And now all William Shatner does is argue with people on Twitter all day.
Picks fights with poor people who are just trying to appreciate his work.
I don't understand, William. What are you doing? Isn't he like 90 something years old? What are you doing? Get off Twitter, Bill.
It's so sad. It is. It's just, this is a movie about new life. Life. We'll forgive old Twitter Will Shatner his indiscretions.
Yeah. I will say that like the fact that over the past year I've like watched 1967 Will Shatner and then 1982 Will Shatner, the thing that made me feel the most old in the world is the shot when Kirk looks at his smartwatch, because he's got a smartwatch, with his glasses on the ridge of his nose. And I was like, oh my God, he's so old. Younger than Tom Cruise is right now, though.
Oh my God, that hurts my body to hear.
It's wild how much has changed in 30 years, isn't it?
Yeah,
40 years.
What's changed is hormone supplementation.
Yes. Oh my God.
It's not a joke, people. That's how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, it like nothing about any of these superstars in their 50s that look amazing is natural. It's all and insustainable. I told you about, this is a total tangent, but I told you about The Rock, and like he gave this big long post about how this is the week they were doing his shirtless scenes for Black Adam, and so he was like deliberately like dehydrating himself to make sure his muscle was like dry muscle, because it looks better for a camera. Yeah, it's like, Jesus Christ, guys.
I mean, bodybuilders die doing that because they dehydrate themselves so severely before the contest, not chronically, but just before the contest. They'll dehydrate themselves and then take like diuretics on top of that, and their kidneys will shut down. Yeah,
Jesus,
it's so funny how like all of the images of like the peak male form in cinema right now are impossible.
It literally like it's a snapshot in time because it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman did the same thing for a lot of his scenes in like the Wolverine, which is the one where he's the most roided out and also dehydrated.
Yeah.
But
nothing will freak me out more than the scene of shirtless Hugh Jackman in X-Men 1 compared to shirtless Hugh Jackman in the Wolverine. In the space of like 18 years, we've gone from man who is pretty well built but still looks like a normal human being to absurd, unnatural looking muscles. Yeah, it's insane.
And we've just gotten used to it.
Yeah, we're just fine with it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man still has to put in some pretty hard time at the gym.
Even though he's just in a suit.
Yeah, but like just so that he can stand next to these other characters in a scene.
Yeah,
and not kind of look, pathetic because that's like this. Yeah, it's great.
Go back to 52-year-olds looking like Will Shatner. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, come on, go easy on us.
The standards of beauty for men are not fair. What happened?
It's unsustainable. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. That's a total tangent. Let's this has been a wild episode where we've just gone all over the place, but I think it's time now, Matt, to vote. What are you feeling about Star Trek 2? Is it worthy of being in the canon? Before you answer.
Yes.
Pretend that we can only let one Star Trek movie into the canon. It's not necessarily true, but just pretend.
Pretend for all Star Trek, including
TNG. Not just original series, all Star Trek. Is this the one you'd want?
Let's see. Is there any other movie that I would even put up as a contender? I mean, I really like The Undiscovered Country as like a fun. What's funny is The Undiscovered Country feels like a Star Wars movie to me. But yeah, I think so. I think this is probably the best.
Yeah, I mean, none of the Next Generation movies I think are even close. I think the closest is First Contact.
Yeah, I mean, I like First Contact, but it doesn't hang together nearly as elegantly as this one does in thematics and character moments, and like that's one of the movies where it's not Jean-Luc Picard anymore. It's Larry Picard.
Yeah, it's good old Larry Picard.
It's just an action hero. He's not the man that we love. So.
I mean, I will say, like, to give this movie and to give, I think, the majority of the original series movies credit, they didn't succumb to the need to make it an action franchise the way all the Next Generation movies did.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said. Like this might be the last of the original series movies that doesn't sort of Flanderize the characters. Because like Spock feels very grounded, like Scotty, like I really like the way they use Scotty in this movie, where like he seems like a bit long suffering at times, and and like but never is it just like, all right, have Scotty say the thing now. It's not pandering, and there's no pandering. And then I think in the later movies they skew a little bit too far into the direction of the caricature.
Sure, definitely. They definitely do. Especially as much as I love Star Trek 4 and its silly San Francisco whale plot, that is just caricature. I mean, when you got like, is it funny when Chekhov says nuclear vessels? Yes, it's funny. Is it Chekhov? Not really.
Right. I mean, that's because a lot of that movie is really just a comedy. But yeah.
Yes, it is just a straight up comedy. Yeah. But a comedy directed by Leonard Nimoy. So he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think this is my favorite of the original series ones for sure. And I haven't seen the ones after this. I haven't seen near as much as I saw this one. I think I've seen like 3, 5, 6, and is there a 7?
No, there's no 7.
3, 5, and 6. I think I've seen once. I think I've seen 4 a few times because it's hilarious. But I don't know as much about those movies. But this is my favorite for sure, and a well-worthy movie. It is in essence a Star Trek movie, and that is not something I could say about many of the other Star Trek movies.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I like First Contact. I like Generations a bit. I mean, it's a guilty pleasure. I'll put it that way.
And with the exception of Into Darkness, I enjoy the new Trek movies. I enjoy them differently than I enjoy a movie like this, but I do enjoy my time with them.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to use this term, but to me, they're kind of popcorn.
Sure,
they're like this is a hefty movie. This movie makes me cry every time. Like I said, I think the closest thing I get to crying in the new movies is actually the beginning of the first one, where Thor sacrifices his life to save his family.
Yes, Thor.
Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth plays Kirk's father in the first of the new Treks.
A severely underweight, emaciated-looking Thor,
aka a normal human being.
Looks like a normal man, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I think that's 2 yeses from us, but of course now we want to hear from you folks. Do you think Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is worthy of being entered into the canon of greatest films of all time? Why or why not? We want to hear from you. So let us know right in the comments of the poll. Send us an email at doofmedia@gmail.com. Just let us know. We want to hear from you.
Yeah. I think Scott, you and I had a lot of untapped need to talk about Star Trek.
I didn't realize how much I needed to talk about Star Trek until we started talking about this movie.
I'm glad that we got to do that.
Yeah, I am too. So thank you, Council, for bringing that movie to us. Now I'm going to move on and watch Star Trek 3 sometime this week and move on. Doof. All right, Matt, let's talk about some box office news. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about how the summer movie season was here, and we thought it was going to do really well. A Quiet Place 2 was performing really well. And I was really anxious to see what the movie In the Heights was going to do. This is the Lin-Manuel Miranda musical, adapted into a movie by John Chu. I think the guy who directed Crazy Rich Asians is the last movie he directed. And I was really curious how this movie was going to do. And Matt, it didn't do too good.
It did bad.
It did bad. Yeah. It made $11 million last weekend, and that's not too much money considering it was open in about 3,500 screens last weekend. It's interesting. So there are a couple things about this. The first is the basic assumption is, that's got to be because it was on HBO Max, right? So it's easier to see it on HBO Max. So they didn't go to the theater and see it, which is what I did because not because I didn't want to go to the theater and see it, but because I have a baby. It's really hard to get to the theater right now.
Right.
And it was very easy for us to put the baby down for a nap and then turn on HBO Max. Really, really easy. But I think that I don't want to overreact to this too much because when I looked at the box office news, I said, oh shit, that's not good. But one, the content delivery president of HBO Max basically came out and said, he didn't say it directly, but he implied that this movie didn't do good on HBO Max either. He basically said, what we've noticed in trends is if a movie does very badly, if a movie does very high numbers in the theater, it will also have high numbers on HBO Max. If it does poorly in the theaters, it will also do poorly on HBO Max. And the numbers of this movie suggest a similar trend.
Yeah.
So it's not like the reason it didn't do well in the theater is because people were watching at home. It just looks like people didn't watch this movie.
Yeah.
And like, I wanted to freak out about this, but the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, why did I expect this movie to do really big numbers? Like, it's a non-known property. Like, yes, this was by the guy who did Hamilton, but not like everyone knows about Hamilton. And
I mean, even Hamilton is kind of a niche appeal, right?
Sure.
But I mean, that was my first thought when you told me, is like, well, I didn't really make the prediction in advance, so I can't take credit for making a prediction. But I would say, like, it's not really a good, 4-quadrant appealing to everybody movie. It's a very specific and kind of weird and unusual thing.
Yeah.
And so when it does numbers like this, it's like, I don't know, maybe those are actually pretty good numbers for a niche appeal movie on the tail end of the pandemic.
I think they might be. I mean, like, this is the thing. Warner Brothers like marketed the shit out of this. So they spent a lot of money on marketing, but like, if you look at the cast of this movie, it's got some great people in it. Anthony Ramos plays the lead, Usnavi. He's wonderful. Corey Hawkins plays his friend Benny. He's wonderful. But these aren't like household names. I think Anthony Ramos is going to be a household name eventually. He's so good in this movie. He has incredible charisma. I think he's going to be a superstar. He's not there yet. And so you don't have like the draw of the big name. You don't have the draw of the big franchise of known properties. The biggest draw you have is this is the musical written by the guy who also did Hamilton, which certainly did draw some people, but not everyone. I think 11 million is fair. And I think this is the type of movie that can gain momentum over time if it has the opportunity to, right? This is a thing that can succeed by word of mouth rather than by big marketing push by giant studio.
Yeah. I think that's a potentially valid, optimistic interpretation. Yeah, it's I was trying to look up the budget. I can't find the budget. Oh well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I was gonna say, like, I think that we have to get the motor running again, and what I mean by that is, I'm somebody who's unusually aware of what's happening in the film scene, and even I think I'd only seen maybe one trailer for this. Okay, why is that? Okay, well, it's because I don't go to movie theaters.
Sure.
And so when am I going to see the trailer for that? I think I saw it on like an autoplay Twitter ad or something, where it's like it probably didn't even have sound, and it's a musical. So obviously it's like you said, I'm sure they spent $1 gazillion advertising it, but that just that's not gonna be nearly as effective. But if you have people going to theaters again, and you can basically force them to watch like 6 trailers before their movie, then they know that these movies exist. It's in their brain. They can make a mental note of it, and then that like that's how I'm used to,
sure,
processing what's coming out soon. Oh, a trailer for this thing, which I saw before that thing, which is a thing that was basically targeted at me because it's the same kind of thing, or it's at least marketed at the same demographic, right?
Yeah, I've been watching like a ton of playoff basketball, and so I've been seeing more commercials than I have in a year, and they've been marketing it like crazy on these channels. So they are pushing it, but how many people watch playoff basketball? Not everyone. So, yeah, I think, I don't know. I think the wrong thing to do, and I see all the trades everywhere freaking out about it. I think the wrong thing to do is to freak out about it, because I think the expectations, like, I think we built this narrative in our heads, and I say we because I did it too, that this is going to be the perfect family back to the movies post-pandemic thing. It's like it takes place during the summer. It's vibrant. It's full of life. The music's great. The dancing's great. It's a feel-good type of story. It's the perfect thing. And it is. Look, I saw the movie and I really enjoyed it. It's very good. I loved the music. If you like Hamilton, you will see it's like a proto Hamilton in a lot of the writing of the music. It's all there. You can see it. The performances are great. The dancing is wonderful. It's a good, feel good movie. But like, you got to get people to know that first. And that's hard for most people. Right.
It's the kind of thing where you need people to start saying that it's good before you just buy into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think. I'm just not a person who's just going to go see some random musical unless people have told me that it's good, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good. It's good. You should go see it.
Okay.
On HBO Max.
Okay.
Or in the theater. I still like my wife and I, like my wife's been looking forward to this movie for a year, and I have too, but she's a bigger musical person than I am, but I love musicals too. And she's been excited about this for a long, long time. And we wanted to go see it in the theater. It just didn't work out. And we still have plans to go see it in the theater, but I don't know how realistic that is, that like, how much extra time do I have to go see a movie in the theater I've already seen? I don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess that'd be slightly more fun because you have like the whole sound system experience. But
oh yeah, like it's a type of movie. It is absolutely the type of movie that I wish I was in a theater for. Like the sound would have been better, the environment, it would have just been would have been so good. Instead of like consciously trying not to look at my phone, even though I'm really enjoying what I'm watching, but I'm addicted to my phone because I can't help myself, which is my experience when I sit and watch a movie on a couch.
Right. Yeah. Inevitably.
Yeah. I mean, even like we're talking about Star Trek too. I loved this movie. And there were moments where I was like, oh, fuck, I've been on my phone for 5 minutes. I have to rewind the movie because I was not watching it.
There was a moment where I was looking at my phone and my daughter goes, "You're looking at your phone. You can't do the podcast now." And I said, "Well, I've seen this movie a bunch of times, okay?"
She fucking called you out.
She did.
That's amazing.
So I have to be very careful, obviously.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so I mean, I'm interested in seeing how the numbers go next weekend. I think it's going to be down. Obviously, it's always going to go down the second weekend, but how much is going to be an interesting thing. And so, I don't know. I'm really interested in the box office this year. I want to see movies do well. I still think like Fast 9 and Black Widow are going to be huge.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
So we will see.
Yeah.
Doof. All right, Matt, let's end the show by talking about Loki. At the time of this recording, only the first episode of Loki has been released, so we have only watched that first episode, so we're only going to talk about that first episode. And Matt, I want to know what you thought about episode 1 of Loki.
I think it might be my favorite of the episode 1s of the shows at this point. At least it's a contender up there with WandaVision. It was I just really like what they're doing. I really like the direction they're going in. I like the premise that they're going for. It's funny because it's are we avoiding spoilers?
No, let's go ahead and say we're going to talk spoilers for episode 1 of Loki.
Yeah, so just the idea of a man who learns that in fact the life path that he was on led to his death, and he is now essentially a ghost almost. Mm-hmm. The show doesn't use these words at all, but like this is basically what it is. And it's like, what is he going to do? How is he going to react to this? It's extremely dramatic. And then how it's executed, I think, is extraordinary. I think Owen Wilson is somehow the perfect choice. Overall, I'm really, really into it and really looking forward to it. What do you think? I
love it. I think I missed Owen Wilson. Why hasn't he been in more things? I love Owen Wilson. And you're right. He's the perfect choice for this character. And his chemistry with Hiddleston just works perfectly. He's able to channel this like casual indifference while also still managing to convey that he's actually concerned about and for the Loki character.
Right.
In a way that I just love to death. He's so good. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The biggest surprise to me is like I'd seen the trailer, so I was expecting like the Brazil-esque poking fun at bureaucracy ad absurdum like type of stuff. Like that's what I was expecting from the tone of the show. And I got as much of that as I wanted. It was great. I loved it. The guy making you sign a form that has everything you've ever said on it. That was great. Loved it. Funny, good stuff. I love the design, the look of the time, place.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff. What I was not expecting was this moment where in this 53-minute episode where they kind of slow everything down and have this deep, talk with the character of Loki. I think it's an interesting choice that the Loki we're talking about here is not the one that is at the end of his arc.
Mhm.
It's a Loki that didn't get to participate in his arc and gets to see a truncated version of that arc. You're absolutely right. It's such an interesting storytelling idea. Like, on the one hand, it serves to rehash the show or the events of the MCU. If anyone happened to be watching the show that hadn't seen it, it's like a good kind of fast forwarded version of that. On the other, it puts the character in this really unique place because it's not like they've gone through their arc and learned their lessons. They've just seen now what their choices will lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a character who hasn't technically learned the lessons, but has seen the end point.
Yeah. I think that we might be in for a very interesting actual, story level analysis of what does the concept of redemption actually mean?
Yeah.
Which is a theme that we've really talked about a lot in some of our other podcasts. Namely, we've got Ward.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Worm also, I would say, and probably Kingslingers as well, honestly.
Yeah.
Because basically we have Loki, we'll call him Loki Prime, underwent a very believable redemption arc where he made some terrible choices, and then he you could see the internal change in him, and then culminating in his self-sacrifice to save his brother, who he ultimately did care about and love.
Yeah.
And then we have this character who is basically being picked out at his lowest point before any of his mistakes have really cost him anything. And then we also know that the antagonist of the show is another Loki variant who presumably made some other choice at some point. We don't actually know yet. So it's a very, very fun opportunity to really investigate this idea of like, what does a redemption actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I really am excited to see where we go with this.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked about in those other stories is the idea that like so much of these redemption arcs just end in that self-sacrificial moment because it's really hard to carry redemption forward when the person is still alive, because then you're like, okay, now what?
Right.
And so it's easy to just kill them off and move on. And yeah, I mean, what is this going to look like? I think it's really, really fascinating. I think you're right. From on the character level, it's got me jazzed. On like the meta MCU level, this is so obviously the setting up point of everything that's going to happen in the next phase of the MCU, right? Like, we kind of talked about how WandaVision was laying the groundwork for that. And it was, at least in the micro of what Wanda's going to be doing and what her involvement is going to be. But I mean, it's very, like, they basically say that there isn't a multiverse right now because the time gods are keeping the multiverse padded down.
Mm-hmm.
And so the assumption is by the end of this story, there will be a multiverse. And that is when all the Doctor Strange shenanigans and WandaVision shenanigans and the Spider-Mans that we're going to be seeing at the end of this year, that's when all that's going to play in. So it's exciting. I mean, I love the show. The show has this bold move it makes where halfway through, Loki opens a drawer and sees the MacGuffins that we've been caring about for 20 movies casually stuffed in a drawer and powerless and useless. And it's almost as if the show has declared we're beyond that now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a risky move because it's done in a way that, like, if done incorrectly, it could be implying none of that stuff you cared about for the last 10 years actually matters. And it's certainly not what it's saying, but it could.
Yeah, I think they'll handle it okay. Although I definitely, in context of our discussion where we complained that they undid a death, we're now in a position where you can undo every death, including Iron Man's, including, Black Widows, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's always been a comic thing, but yeah, I hope we don't go too hard.
I do too. I did like that the show didn't spell out for us the fact that, like, Loki's running. He's running away. He sees the Infinity Stones. He realizes that the Time Authority is like the greatest power in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And then he immediately comes around and starts behaving. And it's like, okay, that's not because he had a change of heart. That's because he realized that this was actually what he wanted to chase after and steal, because he's Loki. He has not had his fundamental character change. You buy that he's actually emotionally affected by the things he sees on the movie, but he is not now, Thor Ragnarok Loki. He is still an asshole. He's still going to try to steal the time thingy. We know this. And I can't wait to see, and he'll have his own arc, I'm sure. It's just, I take your point that like probably by the end of this, something really dramatically different will be happening with the kind of multiversal stuff.
There's definitely going to be like a time oopsie that's going to create a multiverse. Yeah. And then, I mean, it might be, so either the time oopsie happens and Wanda hears her kid after the time oopsie that's created a multiverse, and she's hearing her kid from a different universe. Or Wanda's the one that creates the oopsie.
Yeah, I mean, or Wanda could even. I want to go look at those pictures of like the time gods, because I'm like, is one of those going to be the Scarlet Witch? Like, is that like because that's?
I don't think so.
But like, you get what I mean. That like it all feels related, right?
Yeah,
like it feels like they're intentionally relating all these ideas. Yeah, and they set it up in Endgame too, because they literally had. The Ancient One show the bifurcating timelines thing, which is really the same kind of cartoon image that they show here. It's the same image exactly. And like they kind of hand wave it away, but it wasn't enough for some people, because I still saw people asking, well, how come the Avengers didn't affect anything? And I was like, they said that in the show. Yeah,
they said in the show that everything there happened the way it was supposed to.
And also, I mean, I think to be more specific, I would say the her name is Ancient One, right? I don't remember. Whatever.
I don't remember.
She
Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton specifically was like, you can't do that. And then they were like, what if we fix everything back so that the timelines are consistent? And then she was like, okay, sure. and that's the thing is I think they were allowed to do that because they time traveled in a way that created a self-consistent, pinched off time loop type situation, which maybe is complete bullshit if you really think about it, but at least that's the hand waving solution that the movie gave us.
I mean, but at the end of the day, I just don't give a shit. I just don't care. If the show tells me it's fine, then it's fine. Like, I mean, the thing that matters is Loki's emotional stakes, and that's what's going to matter in the story. And yes, it's going to lead to some time shenanigans, but that will just play off on other characters' emotional stakes. And that's what storytelling is. Yeah. And that's all I care about. Right. So I care about what's happening with Loki. I think you're absolutely right. He is not, I think he certainly was not lying to Owen Wilson when he kind of like told him, no, I don't enjoy hurting people. It's just part of the expression of who I think I'm supposed to be. I don't think he was lying directly there, but yes, he's the god of mischief. This would not be a Loki show if they didn't have him attempt or backstab people.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I liked is the idea, just this is a potential direction, but I like the idea that like the 3 Thor movies were actually sort of the story of Thor becoming the god of thunder. And this could be the story of Loki becoming the god of mischief.
Yeah.
Whereas before this, he hasn't really known who he's supposed to be.
Sure.
Like Loki, trickster god, is not supposed to be a tyrant. He's supposed to be trickster. He's supposed to be in the background.
I like that. And I think I trust Marvel to find a way to kind of thread that needle where he can be the trickster god while also not being like a bad guy,
Yeah. I've always wondered, I never quite exactly understood Loki's last words in Infinity War. And I almost wonder if those aren't some sort of Hail Mary pass aimed at this show where there's going to be some clever resolution attached there. I might be completely crazy here.
Interesting. What were his last words? I can't remember.
He says to Thanos, "You will never be a god." And it's like, why would Thanos give a shit? He's an eternal or a deviant rather. He's like a super being. Thanos does not appear to care whether he's a god, but Loki does for some reason. But that, like, it was a line that I always found mildly confusing in context.
Interesting.
But now I'm wondering if we're gonna kind of revisit that idea.
Interesting. It definitely says more about Loki than it does Thanos. Like, that's what he's most concerned with is status over power.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be cool though. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It's a fun show. We're probably not going to talk about it every week, but I think we will probably circle back around to it and talk about it once it's ended its 8-episode run, and see where that puts us MCU wise, because it's crazy.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. If you have any opinions on Loki, on In the Heights, or on Star Trek II, I almost said Into Darkness, The Wrath of Khan, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on our Twitter account @doofmedia, or at our subreddit. That's r/doofmedia.
Yeah, if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find Matt and I's show, Kingslingers. We are working our way through the books that are adjacent to the Dark Tower, including the one we're talking about right now, which is Salem's Lot. We are about halfway through our discussion of Salem's Lot. It's been a lot of fun. It's a great vampire book. If you haven't read it, start reading it and then come listen to us.
Yeah, really enjoying that one.
And of course, Matt,
uh-huh.
we gotta send him to the Patreon.
Let's do that.
Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating at any of those amounts. If you donate at the $20 level or above, you get to be a member of the Council of Doof, which is the people who nominate and vote on the movies that come before us. So our council is the reason we talked about Star Trek II today. And if you have a movie you want us to see, you can join the council and then try to persuade your council members to vote for your movie. And we'll talk about it here.
Absolutely. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, because every review does help us to get more exposure, tells the algorithm what to promote, and then new people find us, and then the amount of happiness in the world is increased by just that much.
Just that much. We got a new review. I don't know how long ago this was, because I haven't been checking the Doofcast reviews as frequently, but we got a new review. It was back in May. Matt, you want me to read it to you?
Sure.
This is a review from BitSwitch that says, simply the best. Does a river work through a woods? Does it make a lot of noise? Does it make really clever jokes and have insightful commentary on all kinds of media? In the words of Michael, of course it doesn't. But this podcast does. Follow it, because you should. There isn't a better option for a more entertaining group of hosts and folks to spend your time with, so what are you waiting for?
I like that Michael gets quoted. What are we, huh? Thank you so much. That's so nice.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate that, folks. And every one of you that has rated and reviewed us over the time we've been doing this podcast, we appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right, Matt, next week on the show, we are heading back to our Deconstructing Verbinski series. We've got to finish the final Pirates movie at World's End, because they made no more Pirates of the Caribbean movies after this one. They made no more. This was it.
Yep.
They said, oh, Gore Verbinski doesn't want to do them anymore? Well, then we shouldn't make them anymore.
Yeah, it's done.
Mm-hmm. Next week, we'll be talking about At World's End. I can't wait for that conversation. So please join us next week. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.